Thanks for joining us. This is the Black Fathers podcast series, which is a collection of 12 videos covering a spectrum of intricately connected topics related to Black fatherhood. I am Dr. Alvin Thomas, Assistant Professor in the School of Human Ecology at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. A few years ago, New York Mayor Bill de Blasio caught some flack when he shared that he had the talk with his biracial son about interacting with police. You train them to be very careful when they have an encounter with a police officer, he said. That is just one of the major challenges of raising Black children in the USA. Good communication and monitoring are critical parenting practices, and more so, importantly so, for Black families. We are here with an overarching goal to educate, validate, and elevate Black fathers. Joining me in discussing this episode's topic, communication and monitoring, are Associate Professor in the Department of Psychology and Neuroscience at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, Director of the STAR Lab, Dr. Shauna Cooper, Founder and Executive Director of the Real Dads Network, an organization that is committed to strengthening the institution of the family, co-producer and co-director of the award-winning documentary Real Dads, Black Men on Fatherhood, and a former high school principal, Mr. Derek Phillips, and Alameda County Fathers Corps Administrator for the First Five of Alameda County, Mr. Kevin Breeman. Thank you very much, guys, for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
So I want to give each of you an opportunity to kind of take a moment to tell us a little bit more about what you do and specifically its relevance to Black fathers. Maybe we start with Kevin and go around and come back down to Dr. Cooper. So we start with Kevin, go over to Mr. Phillips, and then come down to Dr. Cooper.
Sure, thanks. I work for First Five Alameda County, and that's an organization that is focused on improving the lives and supporting children and caregivers of children birth to 5 years old. The program officer for our community grants program for about 6 years, reviewed hundreds, like literally hundreds of grant applications every couple of years. And we never received any father-specific program applications. Mm-hmm. We never made any father-specific funding decisions. We never made any father-specific grants. We never had any father-centered programming. Mm-hmm. And this is an organization that's focused on supporting the lives of children and caregivers of children birth to 5 years old. So the Fathers Corps was really born out of that gap. You know, we had been around for about 15 years when we started. And so that's a pretty significant oversight, I felt like. I'm a dad. My oldest daughter is 25. I had my first child when I was 19. My wife was 17. Got 3 kids. I was raised by my dad and my stepmom. My dad had 4 brothers. So I was always surrounded by just really amazing, amazing men. And I was still ended up being a teenage parent. And so growing up in Oakland and seeing my peers and friends, a lot of my friends didn't necessarily have that support network. And so that's why I got into this work, really. The gap in services at my current position at First Five, and then just my life experiences with being a young dad and being surrounded by great men. And so the Fathers Corps is really focused on systems change, so creating a father-friendly system of care and support. What we've seen in doing this work since 2013 is that, for the most part, fatherhood has been a blind spot for our social, community, and family support agencies. And I say that for the most part, because there is some intentionality around not serving dads. But for the most part, on an individual basis, it's been a blind spot, and especially in early childhood. Services are focused on serving families and serving parents. But for the most part, those programs revolve around supporting the needs of mom and children. And so the Fathers Corps was founded based on that gap. So really to build the awareness of the need to serve and support fathers and father figures. And so systems change, creating a father-friendly system of care for families capacity building, building the capacity of the providers who work within the system to effectively serve and support fathers and father figures. And then research and assessment, learning from dads themselves how what it is that they need, how we can best support them as a family support program. So that's really what the Father's Corps is about. With all of that, it's rooted in highlighting. The foundation of the work is about highlighting the true narrative of fatherhood, and particularly of Black fatherhood and Black and brown fatherhood. Fathers are engaged and are nurturing and are supportive, and those who are not want to be. And our job as a system of care and support is to support the dads who are engaged and support the dads who are not engaged with getting engaged, because we know that they want to be. So that's kind of the Father's Corps in a nutshell.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Kevin. Over to you, Mr. Phelps.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. Real Dads Network, I'm just going to give you some history behind it. It started in 2004, and Real Dads Network derives from the documentary that was done called Real Dads, Black Men on Fatherhood, that was done in 2000, that had commentary by the late, great Ossie Davis. And that was actually the first documentary that was ever done that focused on positive Black fathers. Yep. As a result of doing that documentary, and the reason why I did the documentary is because when I was, I'm the youngest of 4 brothers, 3 sisters, and I remember I was considered this bad kid because I didn't go to school. I got left back in the first, I went to first grade, I got left back in the second grade, I didn't go to school in the 3rd grade, I didn't go to school in the 4th grade. And my mother just always say, just the only thing I want in life is for you just to graduate from high school. Just please go to school. And that's what my mother, yeah, will go. But what happened is that my mother died when I was 10. So, and I remember the night of the funeral, there was this huge conversation about who's going to take Derek, because nobody wanted to take me. And my sister, who was at the time 26, she was my oldest sister, she took all my other siblings, and she had 2, 3 kids of her own. So nobody wanted me. The aunts, the cousins, the families, like, they don't know what to do with me. So my sister finally gave in and decided to take me. But I remember that night crying, the night of the funeral, crying because my dad was not in a position to take me. My dad was never really a part of my life. So I said, if I ever have children, I made a promise to myself, if I ever have children, I'm going to be actively involved in their lives. So when I had my children, I have 2 girls now, 26-year-old and 21-year-old, but I was very actively involved with everything, the diapers, I did braiding the hair, I did everything. And it felt good to me when I would walk outside and people would say to me, wow, I'm Mr. Mom, Mr. Mom. I'm like, oh, I'm a Mr. Mom. That felt really good. But then I started saying to myself, that's an insult. Because when it comes to Black men, when we're actively involved in taking care of our children, people sort of dismiss that, like, no, that's not what you do. So I said I wanted to change that narrative. So I did the documentary, the Real Dads, Black Men on Fatherhood documentary. And then as a result of doing the documentary, what I realized is a lot of people started coming back to me, and I realized that Black men needed a space, a place to go. There was no resources and support for Black fathers. So I created Real Dads Network in 2004. And what we do at Real Dads Network is that we promote positive Black fathers. I mean, we are the only organization that does a whole week, Real Dads Week. We've been doing it for 12 years, where we celebrate fathers for a whole week. We've given away over 250 awards. We have a student, we've given scholarships to students. We do a daddy-daughter dance. We've influenced Philadelphia to do a daddy-daughter dance. We influenced Chicago to do a daddy-daughter dance. We influenced Virginia to do a daddy-daughter dance. So we promote positive Black fathers. And even now we have our Real Dads Club. Everybody had, with the clubs, you couldn't do the club because of COVID. So we started doing it online. We've been meeting for over 80 weeks. Wow. We have not missed 1 week online. We have dads from around I want to say country, but it's not country anymore, because we have a dad in Nigeria. We have a dad in the UK. We're in the process of doing a Real Dads Club in Nigeria. We're in the process of doing a Real Dads Club in UK. So what we realize is that Black men, fathers, really don't have a space where they can just really engage in real conversations. So that's what we do at Real Dads Network, is that we promote positive fathers. We give them that space where they can be vulnerable, and realize that, you're not in this, you don't have to do this by yourself. There is a support group. So, and that's what we provide at Real Dads Network.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Mr. Phillips. Dr. Cooper.
First, I just want to say how happy I am to be a part of this panel. The two previous testimonies, and so I will say testimonies because in many ways, it was really is the spirit behind the work that I do, and why I do it. And I'm a developmental psychologist, and much of the work that I have done is really focused on understanding the ways that Black families can promote positive outcomes for Black children. In many ways, it's almost exactly what was said, is that there are a lot of narratives about what Black families, what Black parents, mothers, and fathers do or don't do, and that often that narrative is not always reflective of what's going on. And frankly, as a psychologist, but also as a researcher, is that we have a lot to reckon with in terms of the work, how we have engaged in research and how that impacts trust in engaging with researchers. And that's part of the conversation that I always have. But I will say is that really the underpinning of the work that I have done and the work that I do with fathers came from my own experiences. And so I have a father, a stepfather, and I have 14 uncles. So I have seen fatherhood across the spectrum. But for me, very early on, it was clear is that we talk a lot about mothers, right? And I remember this, if anyone remembers the CNN special about the Black family. So I can't remember the specific name, but it had Black mothers and children, Black families and children, and it was very, very mother-centric, and that fathers were totally left out of that portion of it. They were in a later portion, but they were not connected to. And fathers are families, just like mothers are part of families, just like however we think about families. And from that moment, it really made, for me, it was a clear commitment to really think about reflecting the experiences of Black men and fathers as it relates to fatherhood. So a lot of the fathering work will talk about fathering outside of race and culture, right? And that these are things that are important for fathers. And, over the last 15 years, I know that some of that holds across group, but that Black men, we talk a lot about the experiences of Black men, but we often connect it less to fathering. I have a few reasons why that is so, right? We talk about the race-related experiences of Black men, but we don't always connect it to how those race-related experiences map on to parenting, the ways in which they engage with their children. And so that's just a little snippet of the work that I do. And really it is really about reflecting the experiences, the needs of fathers, but also taking a strengths-based approach and having them, fathers, guide how I interpret the work. And, some of that early research, we asked mothers what fathers did, right? So were they involved? And when I am, out working with fathers, I hear that a lot, is that people don't ask me. People don't respect my opinion or my voice as a father, and often as a Black father or a Black man. And so the work that I do is really to reflect those experiences, and really the work, just the message flows through me in a way that reflects what they experience every day, and then how it can impact their engagement with their children.
So realistically, we could end the conversation right there. We had just 3 brilliant testimonies. We could sing a song and then move on and just end it. That's church. We're done. But I think we owe the audience a lot more. I think there's more depth to a lot of the stories and the narratives but all 3 of you have shared. There's some depth to that, I think, that we want to explore. So I'm going to direct the first question and have Mr. Phillips respond to it first, and then have the rest of you chime in afterwards as you see fit. So Derek, I wanted to jump in originally because of your history as a school principal and my history. Assistant principal and my history as a school teacher. recognizing the connection that we had with both children and families, or children and parents, and thinking about how we keep up with how parents keep up with what their children are doing. But I didn't realize that your own personal history also can inform this. So as you think about your own life as a 10-year-old, wondering who's going to take you, and that your life has just changed, and you think about your life as an assistant principal dealing with all these different kids and families, and you think about your life as a person who's now doing this work specifically with fathers and Black fathers, how do parents keep up with what's going on in the lives of their children, especially their teens? And how do you establish that trust with your child?
Wow. Good question. And one of the things when we have the orientation, one of the things that I will always tell the parents is that you have to engage your child in conversation. So, and even with me, one of the things that's been really, when I grew up, I didn't really have the family, we were sitting at the table, but my wife has been very like pushing that every night, we have to eat at the table as a family, we have to eat as a family. So that's what she's pushed all along. So that's what we did. And what happened is that allowed me to engage in conversations with my daughters and to ask them questions. So when I tell parents that what you have to do is that you have to sit down at night and engage in conversation, just have dinner. Make sure you just have a simple thing as dinner together, and then ask questions. And then when you ask your question, well, I tell parents, shut up. Because what happens is that we want to ask the question, and then when we don't get the response right away, we want to follow with another question and another question and another question. So part of my teaching is that what we tell the teachers is that, listen, when you ask questions, also ask high order thinking questions where it's not just yes, no questions, right? And then just be quiet and let them respond. And then when they respond, if you want to ask a follow-up, you ask a follow-up question and just sit back. So, and I think with parents, I tell parents that you have to engage in conversations with your child and you have to listen to them. And sometimes you really have to learn from them. I've learned so much about who I am because of my children. And even as a teacher, when I was teaching in the classroom, my students helped me out with a lot because they taught me a lot about, well, you know what, Derek, I know where we're going when you do this and you do that. They tell you about who you are, but you have to be open to learn. So what I tell students when I started, I would say, listen, that concept of I'm the teacher, you're the student, throw that out the window. I'm a person, you're a person. We're going to learn from each other. So as parents, we have to understand that it's okay not to have all the answers and that you can learn from your child.
Excellent. Thanks. Kevin or Dr. Cooper, either one of you could jump in.
I can go ahead. And so I was, in some ways very similar in terms of just listening. And so, talking with children, I think is the listening component as they just across the age span is important, but particularly when they reach adolescence. And, I even think about, my grandparents or parents is that sometimes they would ask me, oh, what happened? And I'm not even sure they were always listening, but they engaged in so they asked me what I was thinking and that they were listening, that just the exercise of me talking about and engaging in a conversation was so very helpful. And, also, when I, talk with fathers, is that there's often this realization of who your child is, right? So being able to see who your child is, right? So who they are, what they do well, their strengths, the things that they may need to work on, and really use that as a foundation. And I know sometimes, we think about who we hope people may be, but, thinking about who they are and, how you can facilitate that. So that could be around communication and how children communicate. And so those to me are very, very are at the core of how we keep up, with what children are doing, right? And I know we use the word monitoring a lot, and we think of monitoring and we visualize parents hiding behind bushes, right, on the stoop when when the street light comes on, right? All the things that, might have happened when we were younger, but that a large part of monitoring is child disclosure, right? So that children children tell us what they're doing. They tell us who their friends are. They tell us where they're going, right? And I know that we have several ways to monitor actively monitor children, via their phones and all of GPS, but that a huge part of it is children trusting you to say, I went to this party with a friend. This happened. I didn't do this, but I just wanted to let you know. So all of that, at the core of that is really a trust sort of transactional communication.
Yeah, excellent.
It's interesting. I can't even remember what the question was listening to you guys, but we're going through, like I said earlier, my oldest daughter is 25 and, going through those early mid-20s struggles that we all experience. And, we were young parents and, parenting is hard when you're not young. There is no rule book. I know that's a cliche, but that is so real. And you're doing the best that you can. And you want the best for your child. And sometimes that shows up in being too strict or over monitoring, like you just talked about, hiding in the bushes because you want to make sure that your kids are safe. And because we know this world is hard and it is hard on Black children. And so sometimes, especially as a young parent, you might take it too far. You might take it, as a teenage parent, we're trying to make sure that our daughter is not a teenage parent. Mm-hmm. And how that shows up is in a bunch of different ways. No, you can't wear those tight pants. Those tight pants, they're too tight, but this is what everybody's wearing. I don't care, and then, you're fighting battles that you need to just let go. And you don't know that because you're so concerned about protecting them, and you can't step back and say, you know what, the genes aren't going to get her pregnant.
Right.
And maybe we should just let that go. Maybe we want to support her with being herself, and support her so that she has the self-confidence to, make good decisions around boys, because that's what prevents you from getting pregnant. You know what I mean? And so and we are literally going through having these discussions with our oldest daughter now about, yes, we worked too hard on you. Yes, we are sorry. Yes, we took it easier on your sister and your brother. We were better. We got better with as we had more children, and we need you to forgive us and not, and heal, so that we can heal as a family. And so as we talk with dads now, it's, pick your battles. Everything is not a battle, and that's with your kids and your partner. Control what you can control, and be able to identify the things that you can't control. And so I have no idea if that answers any part of your question, but it's just interesting because that's kind of where we are right now as a family.
No, I think that's exactly where the conversation is and where the conversation is going. It's understanding that we are talking about communication and monitoring and the intersection of those two, but also recognizing that the needs of the child and the quality of the parent-child relationship changes as the child grows. So the little kid that would run up to you and give you kisses, your little girl who would run up to you and give you kisses, the kids who would run to the door shouting, "Daddy, daddy, daddy," when you got home from work, they're not doing that. They're likely not doing that at 10, 11, 12. Does that mean that you stop engaging with them? Does that mean that you stop loving them? No. How you display love changes.
Yeah.
Monitor. You used to be able to just walk into your 5-year-old's room to see what they were doing. That's how you were monitoring your 5-year-old to make sure that they didn't have toothpaste splattered all over their bed, and they didn't bring the dog dirty from outside into the bed and were hiding under the sheets with the dog. But when you have a different set of risks, you have risks from outside, dangerous risks from outside being brought into the home by your child unwittingly. The way that you monitor your child has to look different. You can't just walk into the room anymore. The way that you talk to your child, you communicate with your child has to look different. You can't expect your child to come tell you everything. You have to set up the space that makes it comfortable for them to do that without necessarily saying, hey, come here, I have these things that I want to ask you, and you're going to tell me the truth, or you're going to tell me the whole truth, because we know they can give you part of the truth, the part that's palatable for you, right?
I want to add something to that. And as Kevin had brought up, the parenting is hard, and Dr. Cooper, in terms of the communication, another thing that we don't talk about is that for the first time in history, the older generation, we're immigrants. Think about that. We're immigrants, and our children are the natives. So how many times do we go to our child to say, how do I do that?
Yep.
And with that comes a sense of power, that I have all the information. All the marketing and everything is geared towards the young. So we're dealing with a different time. So some of those methods that we might have used before doesn't work, because even as a teacher, when you walk into a classroom, it's like, oh, you're the teacher, you know everything. But here it is now, you don't, because the kid goes, nope, that's not right. So they're challenging you. So it takes a lot for us to really deal with who we are and to be comfortable in strengthening who we are. So that's why we say for a lot of our dads is that the philosophy was always take care of your family first. No, first and foremost, take care of yourself. In order for you to really lift your family up, you have to take care of yourself first. Because if you don't have the strength and the energy, physically and mentally and emotionally, then you're not going to be able to hold your family up. So that's the challenges that we deal with, is that we're in a different age. We are, in a lot of ways, the immigrants, and our kids are the natives.
So kids are becoming more independent, or in some cases, independent a lot quicker. And I could see how a parent could be threatened by that. So how then do we, and this is a question for the panel, how do we balance building that independence in our children while engaging in adequate levels of monitoring and involvement? So how do we make sure we're still part of their world and monitoring and engaging while still being far enough to allow them that independence? Kevin, I think I see your hand up.
Yes, I just wanted to, I'll answer your question, but I wanted to comment on what Derek just said about taking care of yourself. I just got off a call right before this one, and one of the speakers said, if we don't transform our trauma, we will transfer our trauma.
Yep.
And that goes back to, taking care of yourself. If we don't address some of those wounds that we have, and we all have wounds growing up as Black people in this country, I don't care how much money you came from or how poor you were. We all have wounds, and they reveal themselves if you don't address them, acknowledge them, and heal from them. And they reveal themselves in our parenting. They reveal themselves in our interactions with our peers and our partners. So that is a huge piece, Derek. So I really appreciate you saying that. As far as how do we balance monitoring and allowing our children to kind of be themselves and grow and develop?
Right.
It's a process. I mean, for me, it was a process. Again, it goes back to there is no rule book. And you have to be open to being wrong. As a parent, you have to be open to acknowledging the mistakes with your children when you make mistakes. And I don't know the answer. I don't know how to answer that, because there is a real fear. I'm in Oakland, California right now, and the violence is off the hook, right? Like literally, we've had more murders this year than in several years. It's almost like it was back in the 90s almost. And so, when your kid, our youngest is 17, he's a senior in high school now, and when he asked to go to a house party, and it's like, no, I don't know them. And even if I did, I don't know if I'd be comfortable with it because of this device that you can, you invited 20 people, but you can't stop 100 people from showing up. Yep. Because someone decided to post the flyer or post the invitation on their social media.
Yep.
So I don't know how to answer that question, to be honest with you. It's a tough balance, and you want them to grow. I don't let my kids catch the bus. You know, none of, you know, my 21-year-old or my 17-year-old, none of them caught the bus. Simone, my oldest, when she was in high school, we took her and picked her up and dropped her off to school every day till she was a senior in high school and left to go away to college. As an adult now that she, you know, as an adult, she kind of gets around sometimes on public transit, but even now, you know, we try to have her avoid that. So, and there are a lot of things you get from riding the bus that create the person that you are, you know what I mean? And you learn a lot from riding the bus. But you can't be wrong as a parent. The consequences are too great, are too severe if you know, get on the wrong bus at the wrong time. And, you know, you have to, I don't know, that's a tough question. So maybe Derek or Shauna have an answer to that.
I mean, you know, independence is a hard, you know, parents often want a hard, okay, what do I do to make sure that my child is independent? And that's when I say, well, there is no correct answer. But what I often say as a way to work through, you know, what independence is that parents are really, you know, in many ways here to give us skills that allow us to be independent, right? And so independent at a, you know, independence as an adolescent it does mean something different as an adult, right? And so what are the things that, you know, children who are transitioning through adolescence need to feel that while there is structure in the household, that their word is, you know, taken as part of household discussions. However, that may be interpreted given how families, the unique ways that families communicate, right? And so it doesn't mean that they can, you know, drive to school, you know, by themselves at 13 or 14, but that they have some input or that they feel that their voice is heard. And, you know, my stepfather used to be really good at this, right? It ask me what I thought or how I felt about a particular family decision. Didn't necessarily change the decision, but that my voice was taken into account. And, you know, when I think back, I don't remember the decision. I remember that he asked me what I think should happen. And now that I'm older, he listens to me. So my word is the final word. So that's what happens when you become an adult daughter, is that your dad comes to you for the final word. So I'm getting my payback. But that example to me is really, you know, the other side of what kids remember. Do they remember you saying, no, you can't do this? Or do they remember the discussion or sort of the energy behind how the decision was made? And so anyway, so I use that as a way to talk about how we build independence, but also to think about what are the skills necessary for independence, right? And, you know, for adolescents is, you know, often you may be in situations where you have to do something that is different than the group. And not every child, not every adolescent, not even every adult feels comfortable going against the group. And that, you know, building up ways for children to feel confident and saying, no, I'm not going to do that. Or let me call someone first, or let me ask an adult first, that's a skill that can be very helpful for kids. Just feeling confident in being able to say what they feel. And if it's no, that's what it's going to be.
And I would say, to add to that, and Kevin, you know, a lot of things that you said were things like that kids want to hear. When you had said something like, you know, being wrong, you know, admitting that I'm wrong. Those are the things that kids want to hear, because you're saying what you're saying is important, and you're saying I'm not always right. Yep. You know, they want to know, Dr. Cooper, as you were saying, do you have a voice? Mm-hmm. Yes, you do have a voice. This is what's happening. Give me your opinion. And that's what's coming into conflict when we're coming into schools, because when these kids are in school and these teachers, they're not going by what people are just saying, just do this or do that. And that's where they have so much conflict with authority, because they're coming from a different position. Mm-hmm. When we were growing up, it was always like, you respect your elders. This generation, their thing is, no, you're going to respect me. If you don't respect me, I'm not going to respect you. Right. So, and that's part of that, you know, they have a voice, because everything that they hear is your voice matters. Mm-hmm. You're important. So here it is. You're telling me all this, but yet when I come home, you're saying to me, shut up.
Yeah.
So they want to know, if I have a voice, let me have a voice. And sometimes you want them to be honest with you. And sometimes you have to accept the honesty. Like my daughter's like, listen, I don't smoke or drink. I don't do any of that. And here it is, my, 18, 17 years is, dad, I smoke weed. Because she has a very open relationship with my mother. My daughter, my wife. My daughters are very open with my wife. They tell her everything. And even with me, they'll be honest with me and tell me things. And I say, listen, the fact that you're smoking, I don't want you to, but if you're smoking, I need you to be safe about what it is you're doing. If you're going to smoke, I don't want you smoking on the street. If you have to smoke, then go to your car and sit in the car by here, so this way I can watch you. Don't be on the street doing this and that. And then when things are happening on the street, call us, let us know, and be honest. Dad, this is what's happening. I need your help. So we got to be open to that, and we have to allow them to do that, because they're not going to live the life we want them to live. They're going to live their life. So we have to be there to support them, even though sometimes I'm like, oh my gosh, what this weird. But you're being responsible with what you're doing. And that's what I'm trying to prepare you to be responsible. And the fact that if things don't work out, you can come to us. But if something happens and if we shut you down, where are you going to go? To your friends, to the street. Yep. So that's a conversation we as parents have to be open and willing to do. And as you said, Kevin, just saying, you know what, I was wrong about that. I'm learning as well. We're learning and we're doing this together. And that's what kids want to hear. And it's tough for us as parents. It's tough for me. I'm like, you want to be smoking weed. But hey.
I like the idea of apologizing to kids, because I think it sets up a false narrative, an unnatural narrative that adults are always right. If adults are always right, it means that adults never suffer. And if adults are never suffering, then why am I suffering? The child's voice. Why am I suffering? Something must be wrong with me. And so by forcing this unnatural narrative of perfection in decision-making for adults, forces this false narrative on children that they feel they need to live up to, and they can never measure up to it, because it's a lie. It's false, right? So I think letting your child know that I have failed, I made a bad decision, I was wrong, eases up the burden on them to also be willing and brave enough to make mistakes and own up to the mistakes after you've made them. I think we have a goal. I think parents have this goal that they want for their kids, these very positive, altruistic goals that they want for their kids. And I think, as Shauna was just saying, that often we see the goal and we see the path to getting the goal, but we forget, or we seem to not understand or not take into consideration the multitude of skills that it takes to walk the path from here to the goal. And that's where these other pieces come in. That if you want your child to be independent, it's not just about when your child is in a place, they will be able to stand up to peer pressure. That doesn't just happen in the instant. That happens at home, where you have tasks that your child is responsible for, where you model for your child what being responsible looks like, where you give your child space to disagree with you, to be able to say, you know what, Dad, I don't think that's a good decision. I think that's foolish. And that's okay. Because by doing that, when somebody says to them something, they can say, you know what, I hear what you're saying and I can see why you think that's right. But I think it's foolish, and I'm not going to engage in it unless you can convince me otherwise. But they don't just pop up with that out of the blue. They need practice. A football player doesn't just wake up one morning and suddenly you're a star linebacker or a star running back. You have to create the space outside of the game for them to engage the different small skills. And then you build skill upon skill upon skill until eventually those small skills come together to be a full pass or a full tackle. It's the same thing for our kids. We don't just develop independence. there are small skills that lead to independence, and we have to be willing to engage the development of those small skills upon small skills upon small skills until the child develops their own voice and develops their own independence.
That's well said. And so as you were talking, I use the example. So I think we've seen the example where there's a father shaving, and then there's they have a son who has shaving cream on, and he's like 3 and trying to shave too. And so that's imitation, but learning, right? So kids imitate parents, but learning means that when you're not there, they are able to infer the context in which to, have certain behaviors or have, certain discussion. And so that's really what we want to work kids toward is when you're not there, how do they problem solve with peers? How do they talk with their teachers in a way that's an effective communication? How do they deal with issues in a way that allows them to feel confident in both how they're discussing it, but also what that might lead to in terms of outcome? And so that's how as you were talking, I had that clear visual of, we see like the kid who's 2, not even, nary a thought about facial hair, but shaving cream and wanting to shave, but not ready yet, right? Because that's imitation. But years later, being able to say, this is when I'm going to do this, or this is the appropriate moment to do this or engage. That's what we want our children to be able to do.
Exactly. So I know we've been talking about communication for a little bit now, but I think maybe it might be useful for us to clearly detail what we mean when we say communication skills, because I think we've been saying it as if we all understand, we all have the same understanding of what we mean when we say communication skills, and that may not necessarily be so. What do we mean when we say communication skills, and why is it so important for fathers to work on practicing those skills themselves and teaching those skills to their children? What are those skills, and why are they so important to practice and pass on?
For me, it's so funny this conversation and how aligned it is with literally what we're going through right now with our kids. Our 17-year-old son it's like pulling teeth to have a conversation with him, like to get him to talk to us. And so my wife and I, we're looking at each other like, what do we got to do to get this boy to talk? And so we're like concerned, like, is he able to stand up for himself when he needs to stand up for himself? Is he able to communicate what is right, or what is wrong and his role in it, so that he's not in a situation where he's being blamed for something or taking the blame for something that he wasn't a part of, or something, just things like that. And so we go through his back to school night, and we're meeting with his teachers, and his teachers are raving about him, how much they love him and how great he is in class and how he asks great questions and blah, blah, blah. And we're looking at each other like, well, why can't we get this boy to talk to us? So when you ask what are communication skills, I guess it's, as a parent, understanding where your kid is and why he does or doesn't, or why it is hard for him to talk to you, or he doesn't want to talk to you. I mean, looking back, I remember as a teenager, I didn't necessarily want to have long conversations with my parents either. But as far as what you want is, you want them to be able to speak up for themselves. You want them to be able to communicate effectively with their peers, meaning when something's right, great, you can talk about it, you can hold a conversation about it. When something's wrong and you don't want to be a part of it, if you have to, you can explain why you don't want to be a part of it and move on. And so that's what I mean. That's what comes to mind for me as far as what I want my kids to be able to do. I want them to be able to communicate how happy they are or are not. I want them to be able to communicate why they are happy or are not. And I want them to be able to protect themselves from accusations if they come up. I want them to be able to protect themselves and share what their role was in any particular scenario or situation, so that they are, I mean, I think it all boils down to safety. For me, it all boils down to safety and happiness. So that's what I have.
And I would add, just, when I think about communication, the thing that for me is always just about, discussion, having those discussions and listening and just, I make this difference. I don't want you to know what I'm saying. I need you to understand. And there's a difference between knowing something and understanding it. Yeah, I know that I shouldn't drive if I'm had a drink, but I understand that, you know what, if I'm driving, if I'm going out with my friends and I know they're all going to be drinking, then I'm not going to drive or I'm not going to drink. So applying the information, applying it in terms of, learning. So communication is a constant conversation. It's the constant talk. It's the constant building trust. It's the constant. And it's like, and sometimes it's not always about you. Like my daughters are very close to my wife. They tell her everything. They'll tell me certain things,
Right.
And if my daughter was close to one of her teachers. She was like, Dad, this is like my third dad, your second dad. So she would go to that teacher, but that's all good. And Kevin, you had said, you go to school and the teacher is saying, wow, he talks and he does all this in class, but you said he doesn't do that at home because he has a certain relationship with that teacher, and that's great. So I had some of my students, I have students that are 42 and 43, I still keep in contact with, because if they have that relationship, it's okay, because they're getting what they need to move them where they have to go, and understanding that everything doesn't have to be about you. What I tell dads is at the end of the day, guess what? You're not that important. You are part of the whole process because your child lives in a world that consists of so many different things. Your role is to guide. You're there, you're still the first teacher, but your child is going to learn from everybody. And you have to be open and accept the fact that, your child's going to learn from other people. And your child might go to other people to get information that you may not be able to provide. And that's okay, because at the end of the day, it's about your child and not about you.
And your child may go and get information that you can provide, but they prefer to hear it from somebody else.
Yes.
And the fact that they were able to select an appropriate person means that you did a good job.
Yes.
Because they learned from you how to extend their social network. And that's what we're doing. We're teaching our children to that as they go into the world, they're starting to extend their social network. When they were at home, when they were 3, 4, 5, 10, their social network was us, mommy and daddy. And so whatever we said, we just kept telling them, and their world revolved around us. But once they start developing friendships, that's that first social network. Then they start developing friendships with older people, with teachers, with coaches. That's that social network. And we remain a touchstone for that social network. So they'll connect with a coach, and they'll come back and talk to us about how sports practice was, as a way to let us know, here's what's happening. Everything feels safe to me, but what do you think? They may not say it in those words, but by them telling you what's happening in sports, they're saying essentially, here's what's happening in my world of sports. Does that seem cool? And if you don't react and suggest that there's something going on, then they're fine. They keep moving. And you should feel comfortable that your child is strong and mature enough to make those connections. And if your child feels comfortable with you, they'll come back and say, you know what? I find my coach is doing X, Y, Z, or the kids are doing X, Y, Z in practice. And I just don't like when that happens. And the coach doesn't seem to be able to prevent that from happening. The child is essentially telling you, I have gone out, I have connected to another social network, and something is wrong about it. And I'm bringing it back to you now because you are my first network. Like, is there something I can do to fix it? And if I can't do anything to fix it, is there something the adult in that space can do to fix it? And if that can't work, then do I just pull out of it? Or can you come in to help me fix it? Can you help me figure out how to fix it? That's how by doing that, they're learning independence, they're learning maturity, they're learning advocacy, they're learning social skills, they're learning professionalism, they're learning communication, they're learning so much just by doing some of that stuff. And I think that's what you're seeing with your 17-year-old son. That he's gone out and he's made those connections, and he's saying, it's not that you aren't important to me, but I have another space to get some of this stuff from you. Keep talking. I'll listen to you, but I'm not talking back to you anymore, because I have another outlet for that. I'll come back when I need to hear more from you, and I'll go back and get some more over there.
That's very true. That's very true. He is establishing his independence.
Yeah.
You know, he is. I've heard from you. I've heard enough from you. Not I've heard enough, but you know, it's time for me
I need another voice.
Exactly. Exactly. And looking back, I remember being that way with my dad, you know, and then, you know, I turn around and have kids and I'm literally repeating word for word things that he told me. And so that's just the process. That's just the process. And it's keeping yourself in check to not be fooled by the process and forget the process. So you're not jumping down his throat for not talking when he's just acting like a 17-year-old boy.
He's building his independence.
And
So
I was going to say is that a couple. So I think this works for fathers of daughters, sons, whomever. Is that you know, oftentimes, so a lot of the early work that I did was on fathers and daughters, and how fathers predict positive academic outcomes and self-esteem for girls, predicting more so than mothers, right? And you know, people were slightly surprised by that, but the context tells the story, right? So if you think about conflict with the other parent or other social networks, right? And so the example that I use is that mothers and daughters, there's a time period where, you know, things are going good, but then there's a lot of potential conflict, usually around adolescence, and fathers can be really, really good, effective, not just to problem solve, but just to be able to listen, right? And so I use that example as a way to show is that it really, they're interconnected, right? So all of these other social relationships, whether it's peers, how your child relates to their peers or their social network, their other parent, regardless of whether they live in the house or not, right? Because in many cases, it matters in some ways, but not in the ways that we, you know, it's really around sort of the quality of the relationship and the opportunities to connect. But that fathers in particular can be really helpful as soundboards for navigating conflict or stress in another relationship.
I agree totally. I think the important part of that for fathers is to think of themselves as active and reflective listeners. So active listening, kind of like what Mr. Phillips was saying at the beginning, when your child is talking to you, keep quiet. Keep quiet and let them talk. Give them that space to talk. Don't be too quick to jump in with a comment, to jump in with commentary about what they should be doing different. It may not be it's often when they're talking to you, it's not an attempt to teach them something. It's a space to let them talk to you. What you will find happening if you keep interrupting them with an attempt to teach, they will stop coming back to talk to you because you don't listen. You only talk. You have things that you want to get at me while I'm trying to talk to you. So active listening means that you stop and you orient your body and your face to the child. You look them in the eye. If you can't look them in the eye, look at their foreheads. It looks just the same as looking at them in the eye. Nobody can tell the difference if I'm looking in your forehead or in your eye. Look them in the forehead or in the eye and listen to them. Put down your phone. Put down the phone. Put it on silent so you don't get interrupted. Turn off the TV and square your shoulders and give your child your full attention. That's active listening. Reflective listening is be a commentator. Most guys are listening to sports. When you listen to sports, what do you hear the sports commentator doing? Telling you exactly what he or she just saw. So that's how you listen to your child. Your child comes and says, I was sitting here with Sarah and Mary, and then Sarah just came from nowhere and started yelling at me. Your job is not to jump in like, what? Why was she yelling at you? Man, and then throwing your own two cents in there. No, you give that child exactly what they just gave to you. Reflect it. Wow. So you were just sitting there? And they will give you more. Wow. I wonder why Sarah did that. And they'll give you more. And so she was just yelling. You have added nothing to the conversation. You have not added any new things to the conversation. But by reflecting back to your child the things that they have just shared to you, that's telling them, I just heard what you said. So I'm telling you what I heard. And if I heard wrong, you correct me. No, that's not what I'm saying. That I'm saying this. Oh, so you're saying this. Yes, that's what I'm saying. And they feel heard, and they come back over and over again to talk with you because 1, you're listening. 2, you're actively listening. And 3, you're giving them that space without judging them to come and pour their heart and their lives before you. They have difficult lives too, and they want to share those difficult lives. Only if we make space for them to share those difficult lives. If we don't make space, then like Derek and others have said, they'll go find somebody else who's going to listen to them. Whether it be the boyfriend on the block, the dudes around the corner, the friends on social media who are teasing them and bullying them, they'll go find it somewhere if you don't provide it. So this is bringing us actually kind of roundabout now to the end of our conversation. I really, really want to thank all of you. I think this has been a very enlightening discussion. But before we close, it would be remiss of me not to ask each of you to draw your wellspring of experiences with your fathers, your kids, and with your research, with your different experiences, to draw from that wellspring and provide for Black fathers who are listening, and for others who are working with Black fathers who might be listening as well, maybe 1 or 2 takeaways, something practical that fathers can take away and say, you know what, I'm going to go try this thing.
Parents got to understand that as a teacher, I'm just going back as my teacher, I am really the primary educator.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, secondary. As parents, you are the primary. You are primary from day 1. You will always be the primary educator of your child. So as parents, you have to kind of like know your role and know who you are, and go back to that one thing that I would say, have conversation. At dinner, make it a point to have dinner together every night and just engage in conversation.
Yeah.
Listen, and my wife is shouting something from the back because this is something that she constantly preaches on. So you just learn about your child and all those things that we talk about, because as an educator, one of the things that teachers have to do is ask questions, and then the strategies that I tell teachers, you have to ask questions, you have to listen, you have to ask high order thinking questions. So as parents, prepare your kids for school before they get there. Ask them questions, listen to their responses, ask follow-up questions. So those are the things that doesn't cost a lot, just engage. And as you said earlier, Dr. Cooper, listening, and you as well, Dr. Thomas, again, just listening to your child.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you very much, Mr. Phillips.
Well, I'll go ahead. And so I don't even know if I could say anything more, perfect than what we talked about today in terms of like personal reflections, but also, we can talk about it in a book or study, but I think it's really helpful when it all aligns and that it reflects what actually happened. What I often tell fathers, and throughout my process, is that a lot of fathers have felt really stressed when they may have made some mistakes or things that they view as mistakes as parents. And so, some of the takeaways is that it's okay to there's no such thing as a perfect parent, right? And that, you just work at it and you do your best, right? Part of that is also skill building and supports. And so the other takeaway is to find your supports. And so I've had fathers who had a lot of support. I've had fathers who exclusively use online forms of social media as their support system. So that's because they may not have it, in their families or in their communities. And so whatever the nature of the support is, find the spaces that will help you in your parenting role. We ask mothers all the time about parenting, but there are a few spaces where men can go and where they can just readily discuss, the joys and the not so joyful aspects of parenting. And so again, knowing that you don't have to be perfect as a parent, it's a process, but also is that we find your supports and figure out what supports are needed, and don't be afraid to seek those out.
Excellent, thank you. And we'll end with you, Mr. Breman.
I 100% agree with everything that was said. I actually just wrote down, identify your social network of fathers you can connect with regularly and support each other. So that is right in line with what you just said, Shauna. You see my background, that's Dad Discussions. That's our monthly convening where dads come together and just talk about exactly what you just said, Shauna, the joys and challenges of fatherhood. Because there are for sure extreme joys and there are challenges. And to have a space where you can come together and talk to other men, other fathers who are going through some of those same experiences is priceless. It will help you get through the tough times and help you enjoy the good ones even more. And you will be a source of support for somebody who may be going through something that you have already gone through. So that is important. I'd also say work towards establishing or maintaining healthy, high-functioning co-parenting relationships. And that's whether you are romantically involved or are not. I think our society has become more normal for parents to not get along than it has for parents to get along. And kids are resilient. They can get over separation. They can get over divorce. What scars them and sticks with them is that unhealthy relationship between parents, and so do what you can as a dad to establish that and maintain it if you have it already, because that is critical. So that's what I would say. And one more thing that we talked about a little bit earlier is reflect on your own journey and your own wounds, and do the work that you have to do to heal from those, because they will reveal themselves in your parenting and in those co-parenting relationships if you don't. So seek out the support that you need to heal from your life experiences, because we have all had, challenges in our lives. And again, that doesn't matter what your socioeconomic background is. We have all had different experiences that have been challenging, that have shaped us into the people that we are. And if we don't heal from those ones that really have wounded us, they will reveal themselves.
I think some really, really wise advice just all around. Thank you so much. Thanks again for your time, for your experience, your expertise. You've given us some really awesome gems of wisdom and some great practical advice about how to build and support our communication skills as Black dads. The stories that we often hear about Black dads are often from a deficit lens. What others think Black fathers are not doing, and the myth that Black fathers are not present or uninvolved. But your expertise, I think, will be critical in assisting Black fathers to further strengthen their involvement as they continue to enhance their skills as dads to their beautiful, talented, promise-filled kids. Thank you so much again.
Thank you for listening to the Black Fatherhood Podcast with Dr. Alvin Thomas. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with your friends on social media or post a review online. Thanks again for being part of the conversation.